Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah and I love to talk about books, although I haven't been talking about books very often recently. I've had a bit of an unplanned hiatus. One thing I have been doing is reading. Again, it's all about that getting out of my own head. And it's one of the very few things that I can concentrate on for a long period of time. In fact, probably the only thing that I can concentrate on for a long period of time is reading. And so that has remained a staple with me, and so I thought I would wrap up the books that I have read in June, although not the ones that I am reading for the semi-finals of the booktube prize. These are just the ones that I have read myself, and I'm going to start with the ones that I enjoyed the most and work my way down, but please stick around for those kind of lower rated books, because you know, you might find something that I might not have liked it, but it might be good for you. So what are we going to start with? Well, I read The Saint of Lost Things by Tish Delaney as Annette Galley, whose name you might recognise because I have banged on and on about her book Before My Actual Heart Breaks. I have sung the praises of this. I think this is her debut when I read it last year, because I absolutely loved it. It touched me so deeply and I thought it was stunning, it was beautiful. So when I saw that she had another book out so soon, I was a little bit nervous because I was like, oh, could she possibly break me all over again so soon? And well, no, but only very slightly no. Before My Actual Heart Breaks had me sobbing, and that's because it, you know, the story really deeply resonated with me. And so the only reason that The Saint of Lost Things didn't have that same impact was that I felt I was able to read it from a much more objective place. And so for that reason, it's still an utterly fantastic book, because I was able to absorb the story without feeling like I was repeatedly being punched in the gut too often. So this is the story of Lindy Morris, who is living a very small life, exiled to the edge of her abusive grandfather's land in this kind of ugly bungalow with her very bitter aging aunt. And at every turn, she is reminded of what a burden she has been to her family, and the tapestry of her life is just strewn with rips and holes. She was an illegitimate child born into a staunchly Catholic community, and then when she loses her mother at quite a young age, she is left to the mercies of this family that is cold and unforgiving. She does escape as a young woman to London, and that's meant to be Lindy's freedom from them, but now in middle age she has been trapped back on the farm and haunted by her past. So, not a cheery story, but Lindy is the bright light of this book. She, you know, distracts us from her secrets with wit and pithiness that makes the truth of her story all the more heartbreaking when it's revealed. I absolutely loved her. You know, I wanted the best for her and I hated those who didn't see her worth. I think Delaney is so good at creating characters that, you know, they might not always be perfect, but who always get right into your heart. And she can also really write the most awful, nasty characters as well. And again, I was also struck by her ability to create a real sense of place, and with it a sense of claustrophobia, and that's really strong in this book. I think this book is got more in terms of plot than Before My Actual Heart Breaks. We meet Lindy in the present day and we know that she's having mental health struggles, and that, you know, her aunt really holds against her the fact that she's had to, you know, raise her and care for her after her mother died, and how that, you know, fucked things up for the aunt's life as well. But we don't really know why Lindy is the way she is until we start delving into her backstory. So it's kind of told over those two timelines. And in many ways, I think actually Lindy's story is much sadder than Mary's is from Before My Actual Heart Breaks. But this story, and maybe that's just because I'm coming from a different personal perspective, it didn't feel as bleak. And I think a lot of that is to do with Lindy, because she is quite a funny character. So there is that kind of light and shade in the story as well. I just think Tish Delaney is fast. Well, just from the second I started reading her, it's become one of my favourite authors. I cannot wait to see how she chooses to destroy me next. And if you haven't read her, but if you've read like Claire Fuller's Unsettled Ground, oh, it's out of shot, it's down here. I think you would really like Tish Delaney, and I would definitely tell you to give her a shot. The next book I loved in June was The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. But can anyone tell me why, as someone who doesn't enjoy fantasy, I love Erin Morgenstern's books? I really, really do. And they are definitely, at least in my opinion, fantasy novels. I'll admit though, I wasn't sure I was going to love this one to begin with. So this book has a lot going on, and it plunges you in straight away. And I wasn't entirely sure what the hell was going on. This is a story with multiple stories in the story. Like, it's a story about stories told through many stories, and those layers pile up really fast. But I knew from the Night Circus to just kind of go with it, to trust the process, and things would become clearer. And they did, kind of. This book really needs you to concentrate, so just drink some coffee and focus. So we follow Zachary Ezra Rollins, who finds an old uncatalogued book in his university library. I think this book's like a collection of short stories, and he's really digging it. Until he comes across a story which is his story. It's a story about him as a child, but this book is obviously much older than he is, so he's pretty freaked out by this, and he tries to understand how that can be. And this leads him on a journey to a secret library hidden below the world, a secret library that is crumbling and under threat. And this book, it's an adventure story. It's a bit genre bendy, and it speaks a lot to how stories are fundamental in our understanding of ourselves and the world. It's a ride. It's a trip. It has cats and pirates, shady villains, friendship. It's just got bloody everything in it, and it should be a mess, but it really isn't. It's beautiful. I was gripped by it, I was touched by it, I had a lot of fun reading it, all the things. I adored it. I felt the writing was much richer in this book than The Night Circus, and that the characters were more rounded and more tangible, because I felt the actual character development in The Night Circus was a bit secondary to the story. And normally when I read a book like this, I like to get to the end of the story, but with this one I was kind of sad it was over. I could have stayed in that world for ages. So yeah, I hadn't expected to love it as much as I did, but I did. Then I listened to the audiobook of The Second Cut by Louise Welsh, and this is the follow-up to Welsh's 2002 novel, which is quite dusty, The Cutting Room. You can read The Second Cut as a standalone, but I would recommend reading the books in order to really get the most out of the characters and the setting. So I read The Cutting Room when it first came out, or maybe a couple of years after it first came out, and then I reread it again last year and still loved it. It was the first time I saw my city, Glasgow, on the page in such a vivid and realistic way, and but with such a deliciously dark story. And it's remained in my mind for those 20 years and stayed a favourite on reread. Did I think it needed a sequel though? No. But The Second Cut shows how much I know, because revisiting Rilke, who's an auctioneer, and the criminal underbelly that he gets mixed up with was an absolute joy. In this instalment, Rilke is given like a hot tip for a house clearance for the auction house, which could be the boost that Bowery Auctions needs because it's struggling after the pandemic. But when his friend Jojo, who is the one that gave him, sorry, one of my lights just blew out, so this part is now in more shadow. I don't know what that's all about, but you buy cheap on Amazon. I think it's got more to do with the plug, actually. I dropped it and broke it, so I'm a little bit scared to touch it now in case I get electric shock. But anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, so when Jojo, who's the friend that gave Rilke the tip on this house clearance, turns up dead in a doorway in the merchant city, and things aren't what they seem with the house clearance either, Rilke finds himself pulled into the world of drug dealers and like orgy parties. So seems like not much has changed for him in 20 years. I really enjoyed not only the chance to return to Rilke, but also the return to the gay community in Glasgow, because Welsh uses this as a way to discuss how things have and haven't changed in those intervening years. It was so much fun to see old characters again, and also the new ones, because Welsh is really good at crafting characters, and seeing them through Rilke's cynical but quite magnanimous eyes is a point of view that I really, really love. Story-wise, I thought this was gripping and well-paced. I don't think it's as strong as The Cutting Room, but that's not a criticism, because as I've said, like, that book left such an impression on me. I was still captivated by both the plot lines that are in the story, and I thought it was really clever. And like I said, I listened to this as an audiobook, and it was narrated by the amazing Alan Cumming, who I fucking love. But I wasn't sure at first how his like dulcet tones would suit the gritty story. But he's actually an exceptional narrator. It was a really great listening experience. I'm just so happy that this wasn't a disappointment, given how much I loved the Cutting Room. I'll be interested to see how this book is received, though, particularly by gay men, given that Welsh is a woman, albeit a gay woman. Much like with The Cutting Room, I think she handles this in a positive and a sensitive way. But as a straight woman, I'm not the judge of that. I haven't heard any negative takes on The Cutting Room, I don't think. So I'm hoping that this book will be as positively received, both because I love the book and the author, but also because I don't then want to love a book that actually isn't a good representation of gay men. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. The next book I read was Anna Burns's The Milkman, which won the Booker Prize in 2018. I picked this book up without really knowing anything about it, except for a vague idea that I think some people found it very difficult to read. But like I said, yeah, it also won the Booker, although that isn't typically something that would pull me to a book, but it is set during the Troubles in Ireland, which I am interested in reading about. So I was wary but curious, I suppose. So in this book, instead of names, the narrator uses kind of nicknames or descriptors of people to identify them. And when I looked at other people's reviews, a lot of people struggled with that, but I actually didn't see the issue. I thought actually it added something to the story, to the characters, and was often quite funny. The milkman of the title is not, in fact, a milkman. But he's some sort of high-profile Republican resistance figure, and he is stalking our narrator, who is I think she's about 19, 20 in this book. She's very uninterested and quite unnerved by his presence, but when the local gossip mill and her own family pick up on what's happening, it's skewed, and she's seen as like this hussy who's involved in a relationship with a married man, which is very far from the truth. And the backdrop to this is a community dealing with the realities of the conflict between Unionists and Republicans, and the desire of our narrator to keep her life private, and also is navigating a relationship of her own. We know from the opening sentence that the milkman is shot, and the book leads us up to this point. This book is densely written, like it's quite a stream of consciousness. The voice of the narrator is really distinct and can be quite lyrical. I think Burns is a fantastic writer, able to be funny and poignant in a very realistic way. Our narrator is quite a unique person, and I actually really loved being inside her head. It was a perspective not only on her situation, but also on the troubles that I really enjoyed reading. I felt very immersed in her world and her mind, and I found it, yes, intense, but fascinating. And if that hasn't convinced you, look at this stunning cover. But seriously, like, I do understand how this book won't be for everyone. I really enjoyed it. It surprised me at how good it was. Sorry, that's my dog barking at a postman. And I think, what was that? Yeah, I think Burns is a really special writer. I really, really enjoyed this. And I've been trying to clear my backlog of galleys, not including the one I'm currently reading. I have 16 on it, so I've kind of planned it out to read a few a month until I get to the end of the year and get to kind of net galley 0. So the first one was The Mixed Race Experience, Reflections and Revelations on Multicultural Identity, and this is by two sisters called Natalie Evans. Oh, I've forgotten the sister's name. I'll put it on the screen. Oh my god, I'm doing well here. So I have been trying to expand my understanding of the experiences of others through my reading. I've talked about that a lot on here. Many of the books I've read on racism or the Black experience have been quite US centric, and not to my recollection, I don't think any of them have been completely focused on the experience of mixed race people. So this book had that focus and was also by British authors, has gone, some way into filling some of the gaps in my knowledge. I thought this was a really accessible book which covers many, facets of being a mixed race person in a society that defaults to racializing people and doesn't always know how to do so with people of diverse racial backgrounds. The othering, the fetishizing, the excluding and the prejudice that is part of, moving through the world for people of a mixed race background. It's different to those who are seen as, like wholly Black, even at a group level. And this book strives to display that on an individual level as well. That experience can be felt in even more varied ways. It uses interviews with not just the author's experience, but it uses interviews with other mixed race people. And it's kind of a space for mixed race people to be seen and relate to others with similar experiences. But this book also looks outwards, applying a critical eye to the inherent racism of society, even in parents or family members of mixed race people, with a view to promoting people to have an honest assessment and modify how people are viewed or behaved towards. And I found that very helpful in thinking of my own way of seeing people and thinking about how the mixed race experience, yes, is similar, but also quite different from the wider issue of racism as experienced by those that are seen as Black. And I thought this was a really interesting book. I definitely appreciated the chance to read it and would recommend it to anyone else who is looking to understand more about the topic and people who live the mixed race experience. Then I read Life Ceremony by Sayaka Murata, who is the author who wrote Convenience Store Woman and I think Earthlings is her other book, although I haven't read that. And I'll go into this by saying that I was not as bowled over by Convenience Store Woman as many other people were. I read it last year and was slightly underwhelmed by it. So I'm just maybe not the right reader for this author. So this is a collection of short stories which all focus on like a societal norm, a different kind of societal norm per short story, and subverts that norm to like the point of absurdity, which I thought sounded really fun. Why don't we eat humans? Why don't we eat the weeds in the cracks of the pavement? Why don't we keep middle-aged men as pets? There's a lot in this short story collection, and there is a lot to like in this collection. Some of the stories were gross out page turners, and others were actually quite thought-provoking. But as a whole, something just felt off to me, as if the subversion was the main focus, and that, you know, shocking and repulsing people was the whole point of these stories. You know, it's not to say the stories are bad, and I don't mind being a little bit revolted every now and again, but the actual insights being made by the stories aren't particularly deep, and also aren't what stays with, well, it didn't stay with me after the story ends. So entertaining if you like that sort of thing, but just not meaty enough for me. Maybe that's why we don't eat humans. And then finally, I read the Happy Me Project, the no-nonsense guide to self-development by Holly Matthews. And as you'll have gathered from the start of this video, my life is in crisis. I am a mess. I need help, but I'm poor, so self-help it is. And I picked this book because the title spoke to me. I see self-improvement as a project, something that will take work, and isn't as simple as reading, you know, like some inspirational quotes on Instagram. But also, I don't really do spiritual, so a straight talking approach with a realistic perspective sounded like kind of up my street. And I thought this book is set out really well. So it's set out in sections, and each section contains like a short discussion on the topic of that section, and then some practical exercises for you to apply. And so the sections mean that you don't need to read it start to finish. You can take what you need and leave what you don't, and it's really clear how you can do that. And that also makes it a book that you can return to when different things come up in life. Some topics are more applicable to me than others, but the book kind of embraces that. And as promised, it doesn't shroud its advice in spirituality or inaccessible concepts or flowery hippy-dippy language. This is down to earth, it's accessible, and it's pretty inclusive no matter what your beliefs are. And when I started reading this and realised that Holly Matthews was, like when she was a kid, an actor in one of my favourite TV programmes, Biker Grove, don't judge. So I was delighted, but also very skeptical, because how did that equip her to give out this advice? Although she goes into it and like how her life after Biker Grove has taken quite a different path. She isn't qualified in psychology, but she has turned her interest in self-improvement into a career as a life coach. So she doesn't have the qualifications as such, but I found that she has made an attempt to back up her advice with research, and in most cases brought together concepts that are quite popular, but she brought them together well with actionable exercises to actually put them into practice. However, I did feel that this book tries to cover so many things that nothing is really given much of the deep dive that you might need. I suppose in those cases you should seek out specific sources that do go deeper. So this is very much like a jumping off point for self-improvement. And for me, because I've read like not a lot, but slightly wider in this genre, I did find it quite surface level. I enjoyed Holly's voice and the format of this book, but for anyone who is really struggling or going through a specific trauma, you know, or a specific mental health struggle, then this probably won't be as helpful as it would be for someone who's just needing to get out of a rut, or needs a bit of a kick up the bum. So make of that what you will. So those are the books that I read in June that weren't for the BookTube prize. A good mixed bag. I have a feeling that people won't agree with me on life ceremonies. So I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on that, or on any of the other books, whether you've read them or you've read other books by those authors, what you thought, whether I've inspired you to pick them up. Do let me know in the comments below, because I love to chat books. And this is the longest I have talked for a very long time, and my throat is now really dry and I need to go and have a drink. So fingers crossed this is me breaking the seal of coming back into BookTube, and that there will be another video from me next Saturday. So until then, bye!